Sony has just dropped the official teaser of a new full-frame vlogging camera, and we have some alleged confirmation on what we can expect out of this little new powerhouse of a camera, some of which is cause for concern. So how will this new camera stack up with Sony's existing lineup and the rest of the camera market? And should you be clearing up some cap space in the old bank account to add one to your cart? Let's find out. What's up, squad? Kyle Meshna here, photographer and creator educator based in Utah. But let's skip over the rest of the pleasantries and talk about what we know about this intriguing new camera. According to Sony Alpha Rumors, Sony is announcing a new full-frame vlogging camera called the Sony ZV-E1, set to launch on March 29th. And if you're watching after March 29th, hello from the future. Do you have self-driving cars yet? No? The ZV-E1 will be equipped with the spectacular Sony a7S III sensor, which is fantastic for its dynamic range, jaw-dropping low-light performance, and smooth as butter rolling shutter performance. Smooth as butter rolling shutter. Now I already know what you're thinking. But Cal, the a7S III is only 12 megapixels. Doesn't my phone have that? Well, yes, you would be correct. And now you might think that a 12 megapixel camera sounds terrible, but hold on. That means that it is optimized perfectly for 4K readout. And that means, in theory, it should be able to handle high-speed 4K recording for longer periods without overheating. Don't worry, we're going to come back to the overheating in just a minute. This is unlike something like the 24 megapixel Canon R8. There's no need to squish down those 24 megapixels down to 12 in order to do the standard 4K video. Also, in today's social media centric world, 12 megapixels is more than enough to be viewed on our small screens that we're all looking at. Heck, my Sony A1 took a dip in the ocean a few months back and I was limited to just my Sony a7S III and I did just fine even on some major commercial shoots. I'm curious though, do you think that 12 megapixels is enough? What's the lowest megapixel that you'd be okay owning? Let me know in the comments. The camera's body is rumored to be a mix between an FX3 and an A7C, so that means we're getting an all-new body design on this new camera. We do have a few leaked images of what this camera body looks like, but it looks like those photos were taken on a Nikon, so we'll have to wait until launch to see what it actually looks like. The ZV-E1 will reportedly offer both 4K 60 and 4K 120 FPS recording without any cropping or pixel binning, but the 4K 120 may be only available after a firmware update. And we've been waiting for focus breathing compensation firmware updates for the a7S III, the A1, and the FX3 for years now. So in my mind, if it's not available at launch, I'm skeptical in Sony's ability to actually deliver on it. It will also feature the autofocus system of the A7R5, which is nothing short of fantastic. Given this is part of the ZV-E lineup, we can also expect for it to inherit some of the things from its predecessors, the ZV-1 and the ZV-E10. Based on the rumors and the official teaser image, we can almost be certain that there will be no viewfinder. For me, given that this is a vlogging focused camera, that does make some sense. We also see that there is a fluffy little friend on top of the camera, basically confirming that this will also feature the typical ZV-E style built-in microphone, which actually does sound quite impressive. Now, I don't think this camera is where we'll see it, and I know that this may be an unpopular opinion here, but I think Sony really needs to work on making a camera that works in both orientations if they're going to be selling it to the vlogger, TikToker, content creator crowd. Heck, I literally was just on set for a commercial shoot that was filmed entirely in vertical orientation. Let me tell you, you have not lived until you've seen a C500 Mark III rigged up vertically. Whether it's something like a DJI style shifting sensor, a square sensor that just allows for multi-format crops and post, or even just a better vertical grip, this is definitely something that I would like to see. But back to what we will likely actually see in the ZV-E1, in order to get the price of this camera down, Sony is definitely going to need to hinder it in some way. In addition to no EVF, I think we can reasonably predict that this means something like a single SD card slot, potentially no mechanical shutter, possibly and most likely no in-body image stabilization, and instead they'll likely rely on something like Active Steady Shot, which uses software to stabilize the footage rather than the physical sensor moving. Active Steady Shot is definitely decent, but is nowhere near as good as IBIS, so that's probably going to be something you need to consider when making a decision. I'd also guess that the overall build quality needs to be much closer to that of the ZV-E lineup. Think less buttons, more diving into menus to adjust the settings, overall cheaper, plasticky feel to it. Now, there are rumors that this thing is overheating at the moment, which I find surprising given how good the a7S III and FX3 perform in this area. Again, that's what that one-to-one readout of the 4K sensor is supposed to allow for. It is possible that they're still working on solving this issue prior to launch. So one way that they could do this is by slowing down the read clock. This will mean that it won't perform as well as the FX3 and the S3 in terms of rolling shutter, which maybe that's the point to kind of prevent this camera from cannibalizing the higher end of the lineup. And with respect to this, rumors have been flying all around saying that this thing is going to be priced anywhere between $1,500 to $3,000, which is a massive swing and will greatly determine whether or not I'd actually recommend purchasing this camera. That said, the most recent rumors have it listed at around $2,500. So, I think it's exciting that Sony is pushing the envelope and genuinely leading the industry by catering to creators, providing many, many great options, and actually working to bring down the cost of really great video capabilities. That said, $2,500 for a vlogging camera is quite steep. This would put it at around $1,000 more expensive than like the Canon R8, who has specs that are kind of similar. But with respect to the rest of the Sony lineup, it places it directly in the difficult decision category, where you need to pick your poison in terms of trade-offs. On the lower end, you have the ZV-E10 for $700. APS-C lacking in terms of image quality and build quality and some functionality. Then you have the FX30 at $1,800, still APS-C, but great form factor, a true workhorse in the 10-bit 4K realm with no overheating issues and some limitations on the photo side at the moment. And then on the top end, you have the A7S III for $3,500. Full frame, EVF, great IBIS, no overheating, great rolling shutter, fantastic all-around performance, but missing out on some of the newer software features like those new AF modes, focus breathing compensation, etc. Then you have the FX3 for $3,900, essentially an A7S III, but more designed from a form factor perspective for the working professional. And then now you see the ZV-E1 kind of slotting nicely in between all of them at $2,500. It'll be full frame, lacking in many of the hardware features, but potentially making up for it in many of the newer software features. In my mind, the decision to buy one comes down to a few key things. First, can they fix the overheating issues without making the rolling shutter atrocious? If that's the case, suddenly I think that this becomes a lot more interesting. Second is, could you just find a used A7S III? The truth is, despite being released around 3 years ago, the A7S III is still a fantastic camera. I'm personally seeing them priced around $3,000 on the used market, so as long as you can find one that's in good condition, I personally think it might be worth saving up that extra $500-ish to go for the A7S III. That said, I do think that this camera means that the successor of the A7S III and the FX3 is probably not far off, and we might see that coming by the end of the year, potentially with a 6K sensor. I don't know, what do you think? In the meantime, if you want to see more reviews from me on Sony cameras or other cameras, be sure to subscribe, play thumb more with the like button, and while you're waiting for my next video, you can watch this one next. Peace.